I just graduated from college and got a job in a company that was just starting at operations and was operated with a very small staff. We were only 7 employees. The company was dedicated to providing financial advice, and the owner, who was a woman with a lot of experience in the area, knew how to treat her employees. She was a little quiet, but she spoke with confidence when it was necessary. She was the kind of leader that anyone would admire. We did a job for a large company, sacrificing night hours and family time to get everything done on time. It took 2 full weeks, including weekends, but we did an excellent job. As compensation, she decided to take the whole team to the forest to camp and watch some horror movies to have a good time and forget the stress and connect with nature. I thought the idea was excellent, and my colleagues thought the same, since everyone would be looking for an excuse to get out of the noisy city. I was the youngest in the company. I was only 19 and I had to have my parents' permission, but because I was working and recently graduated from college, they considered that I was almost becoming an adult. They agreed and let me go. I was also going with my coworkers and my boss. What could go wrong? It was Friday and the traffic was a little heavy, so we met in the parking lot and left for that place. A little later, we went out to the road that led to the mountains, but it was nighttime. It was very foggy and visibility was poor. There were no lights, not a single vehicle. It looked like an abandoned place, and for some reason people had stopped visiting it. My companions were excited. It was everything they had promised, a spooky place to spend a night of terror. I, on the other hand, was scared. I had a feeling, and something told me that we should not go on. I tried to warn my companions, but no one listened to me. Everyone was focused on getting to that place. A while later, we turned onto a narrow road, which had no asphalt, and the thickness of the forest increased considerably. It was a remote place where electronic devices did not work. I know because my phone stopped working, and that filled me with more fear. We arrived at the place, and it was right on the shore of a beautiful lake, surrounded by pine trees and a sepulchral silence. In a long time I had not seen so many stars. After all, it did not seem so bad, and I calmed down for a while. Yes, for a while. After telling horror stories and watching a movie, we all got into the same tent to sleep. Everything was silent until we heard a noise in the water. "It's a fish," said one of my companions. But it was too loud to be one. I looked out for a gap, but everything was fine. No one was there. So we went back to sleep. A few seconds later the noise came again, but this time no one woke up. Only me. I tried to wake the others, but they were submerged in such a deep sleep that they didn't even move. It was 11 o'clock at night. I remember it perfectly. I saw it on the watch in the hands of one of my friends. The fog was thick, but through one of the holes in the tent, I caught a glimpse of a woman emerging from the water. Despite the poor visibility, I could see that she was not wearing any clothes and that her hair, as long and dark as the night, covered her body. Her skin was pale, and she began to approach the tent. Suddenly, she changed her course toward a rock at the edge of the lake to sit there and start singing the most beautiful song I had ever heard. We all woke up and came out of the tent to see that beautiful woman singing. A friend approached the woman as we all asked him to come back, but he lost his mind and decided to sit next to the woman. As soon as he sat down next to her, the woman's eyes turned totally black. She took her by the hand and led him into the depths of the lake. No one could do anything but scream in despair when they saw that the whole lake was full of those creatures. The next day, we went to a nearby town and alerted the police, and they sent a team to inspect the area. As the days went by, the situation escalated to interstate level. They sent federal police, firemen, rescue teams, and even divers, but no one could find anything except his watch on which he had seen the time that night. To this day, the area remains closed and access is prohibited, but some people come close and say they hear the singing of those beings at midnight, but they do not dare go there. I woke up early one morning to complete some business I had to take care of at home. It was Saturday and I had to take advantage of my day off. Otherwise, it was going to be impossible. I needed some tools, and for that I went to my neighbor Joe's house, who always had all kinds of gadgets in his garage. Once at the door, I knocked several times, but nobody answered. I proceeded to call him, but he didn't answer. I went to take a look through his bedroom window, but it was closed, as if no one was there, but his car was in front of the house. Joe was home, but something wasn't right. So I decided to go inside, since the locks were open. When I opened the door, the house was dark and disorganized. It was dirty as if no one had lived there for a long time, but it was impossible because just yesterday I saw Joe. I continued walking and checked every corner of the house, but Joe was gone. There was no trace of my old friend. Suddenly, I heard a noise coming from the room just down the hall. I wasn't sure if it was a person or some animal that had infiltrated the house, so I went in there carefully. I entered slowly, and in that room there was an old picture of Joe, which was full of dust as if it had been a long time since the last time someone had touched it. I heard my wife's voice outside the house and went out to see what she wanted. He told me, "It can't be again." "What?" "Ask." "Honey, I understand that Joe leaving was a hard thing to get over, but it's time to put it all behind us." "What are you talking about?" I asked. "Here we go again. Joe passed away 5 years ago, and no one has lived in that house since. It is even forbidden by the authorities to enter there. I was petrified for a long time, and then came to my senses. I may be a little crazy, but every morning I see my old friend waving at me through the window. Whether real or imaginary, it makes me feel close to him." I knew something was wrong the moment we descended into the Goldstrike mine. The air was too heavy, too still, carrying a metallic tang that wasn't just from the rock. 6 of us: Marcus, Lena, Jake, Tom, Sarah, and me had come down here chasing gold. But by noon, all I could think about was getting out. Then the cave-in happened. A rumble, a scream, and silence, broken only by the drip of water echoing in the dark. "Everyone okay?" Marcus shouted, his voice hoarse. I nodded, though my hands were shaking as I swept my flashlight over the rubble. The tunnel was blocked, a wall of jagged rock sealing us in. No signal, no way out, just us 300 feet underground, with only our headlamps and the weight of the mountain pressing down. Lena, the geologist, tried to stay calm. "We need to find another way out," she said, her voice steady but strained. "This shaft isn't on any map. It's too old, too unstable." I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the mine didn't want us to leave. Hours passed. We rationed our water, checked our gear, and started clearing the rubble. But the deeper we dug, the colder it got, and a strange hum vibrated through the rock, like a heartbeat. Lena pressed her ear to the wall. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. I did. It was low, rhythmic, coming from somewhere below. My stomach twisted. "It's not natural," I said, my voice barely audible. The others looked at me, but I couldn't explain it. This place felt wrong, like it was watching us. By nightfall, if there was such a thing down here, our headlamps began to fail one by one. Darkness crept in thick and heavy, pressing against my skin. Sarah's radio crackled, not with static, but with whispers. Soft, sibilant voices in a language I couldn't understand. She dropped it, her hands trembling. "They're calling us," she stammered. That's when I saw the first shadow. It was Jake who screamed, stumbling back as a flicker moved at the edge of his light. Humanoid, but wrong, with limbs too long and eyes that glowed like molten gold. I swung my beam around, but it was gone. The air felt thicker, heavier, and I knew we weren't alone. "We need to get out," Lena said, her voice breaking. "Now." We ran, but the tunnels twisted, doubling back on themselves. The hum grew louder, a deafening pulse that shook the walls. Golden veins spread across the rock, creeping like roots, pulsing faintly. I reached out to touch one, but Tom grabbed my arm. "Don't," he growled. "This ain't right." The whispers turned to laughter, high and shrill, echoing from every direction. Sarah collapsed, clutching her head, blood trickling from her nose. "They want us," she gasped. "They've always wanted us." Marcus pulled her up, but his own resolve was crumbling. "What are they?" he demanded. "Guardians," Tom said, his eyes wild. "Old miners used to talk about them. Spirits of the mountain, bound to the gold. They don't let anyone take it, not without a price." The price came too soon. Jake vanished first. One moment he was beside me. The next a golden tendril lashed out from the wall, dragging him into the darkness. His scream cut off abruptly, and I froze, horror rooting me in place. Lena shouted, "Run!" and we scattered. I don't know how I ended up alone. The tunnel shifted, the floor tilting beneath my feet. My headlamp flickered, casting wild shadows. I found myself in a chamber filled with glittering veins, their glow casting an eerie light. In the center stood a figure, tall, skeletal, its skin a mosaic of gold and stone. Its eyes burned into mine, and its voice boomed in my skull. "You trespass," it said. "The gold is ours. You will join us." I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The cold seeped into my bones, the golden veins spreading over my skin, binding me to the rock. I fought, thrashing, but it was like fighting the mountain itself. Faces appeared in the walls, miners like us, their expressions frozen in agony, mouths open in silent screams. They were trapped here, just like we were. I saw the others in flashes, Marcus swinging his pickaxe at the shadows, Lena clawing at the rock, Tom shouting prayers that went unanswered. But it was too late for them, just as it was too late for me. The golden tendril tightened, and I felt my body merging with the stone, my mind fracturing as the hum consumed me. My last thought was of the surface, of sunlight I would never see again. But even that faded, replaced by the endless pulse of the mountain, the laughter of the guardians, and the knowledge that we were theirs forever. Above ground, rescue teams arrived too late. The mine was silent. The entrance collapsed as if it had never existed. But deep below, the hum continued, louder now, joined by our voices. 6 more souls added to the chorus of the damned. The gold strike mine was forgotten, swallowed by the mountain. But on moonless nights, the locals swore they heard whispers on the wind, and the ground trembled with a golden, insatiable hunger. And I, Ethan, was part of it now, watching, waiting for the next trespassers to descend into our eternal prison. I've lived in Hollow Creek my whole life, a speck of a town nestled in the shadow of Black Ridge Mountain. We're used to the quiet, the kind that settles into your bones. But lately that quiet feels wrong. It's not empty. It's heavy, like something's watching, waiting. And I think I know what it is. It started 6 months ago, after old man Carter disappeared. He was the last of the original families, a grizzled hermit who lived in a cabin up by the ridge. One morning, his door was wide open, his coffee still warm on the table. But he was gone. No tracks, no struggle, just gone. The sheriff, Tom Grady, said it was probably bears or dementia, but we all knew better. Carter wasn't the type to wander off. That night, the wind howled like it was alive, and I swear I saw something move in the trees outside my window. A shadow taller than a man, with eyes that glinted like wet coal. I told myself it was my imagination. We should have left then. But Hollow Creek is all we've got. The nearest city is 3 hours away, and most of us can't afford to uproot. So we stayed in the entity, whatever it is. Stayed too. It started small. Lights flickering. Doors creaking open on their own. Whispers in the dark that sounded like our own voices but twisted, mocking. Then the accidents began. I tried to convince people to leave, but they wouldn't listen. This is our home. They'd say, their eyes glazed over, like they were already half gone. Even Sheriff Grady, who used to be sharp as a tack, started muttering about the mountain's will. I saw the fear in him, though, when he thought no one was looking. Last week, it got worse. I was closing up the general store when the lights went out. My flashlight beam shook as I swept it around, and there it was, a shape in the corner, taller than the shelves, its limbs too long, its face a blur of shadows. It didn't move, but I felt its eyes on me, cold and hungry. "You can't leave." It whispered, its voice like gravel and wind. "This is mine." I ran, slamming the door behind me, but the lock wouldn't hold. That night, it came to my house. I barricaded the windows, but the shadows seeped through cracks, pooling on the floor like ink. My dog, Rusty, barked once and then went silent, his eyes rolling back as he collapsed, foam at his mouth. The entity's voice filled the room, A chorus of screams and laughter. "You belong to me," it said. "All of you." The next morning, half the town was gone. Houses empty, cars abandoned, breakfast left uneaten on tables. The ones who remained were different, pale, hollow-eyed, speaking in riddles about the pact. They said our ancestors made a deal with something in the mountain, trading their freedom for prosperity. But the entity wasn't satisfied. It wanted more. It always wants more. I found Sheriff Grady at the station, scribbling on the walls with charcoal. "It feeds on us." He mumbled, his hand shaking. "The fear, the despair, it's never enough. We thought we could contain it, but it's awake now." "Awake?" I asked, my voice cracking. He pointed to an old ledger on his desk, yellowed and brittle. It detailed a ritual from 1892, when the founders of Hollow Creek summoned a guardian to protect their gold mines. They didn't realize it was a curse, a shadow that would bind itself to town, ensuring no one could ever leave without its permission. That night, I decided to end it. I gathered what was left of us, me, Grady, and a few others who still had their wits. We armed ourselves with axes, shotguns, and whatever holy water we could scrounge from a church. We marched up the Black Ridge, to the cave where the ledger said the entity was born. The cave was cold, the air thick with the smell of rot. As we descended, the walls pulsed with a faint, sickly light, and the shadows moved on their own, whispering our names. "Ethan," they hissed, "you can't escape. You're mine." Grady went first, his shotgun trembling. He fired at a shadow, but the pellets passed through, and the darkness swallowed him whole. I heard his scream cut short, and then silence. The others panicked, scattering, but I kept going, driven by a mix of terror and rage. In the deepest chamber, I found it. The entity was a mass of writhing shadows, its form shifting between human and monstrous, its eyes burning like embers. It towered over me, its voice a roar that shook the cave. "You think you can destroy me?" It sneered. "I am the heart of this place. You are nothing." I raised my axe, but it didn't matter. The shadows lashed out, pinning me to the wall. I felt its cold seep into me, its hunger clawing at my mind. Images flashed before my eyes. Centuries of trapped souls, their despair feeding the entity, their bodies becoming part of the mountain. I saw my own face among them, hollow and screaming. But then I remembered the ledger. The pact could be broken, but not with violence. It required sacrifice. I thought of Grady, of the others, and I knew what I had to do. "Take me?" I whispered. "Leave them alone." The entity paused, its eyes narrowing. "A bargain?" It said, its voice curious. "Yes," I said, my heart pounding. "Me, forever. But the town goes free." It laughed, a sound that made my bones ache, but I felt the shift. The shadows released me, and the cave trembled. "So be it," it said. "But know this, I will never truly let go." I woke up outside, the dawn breaking over Hollow Creek. The town was silent, but the people were there, dazed but alive. They didn't remember the entity, didn't remember me. To them, I'd vanished, just like Carter. But I know the truth. I feel it every night. The cold, the whispers, the weight of its presence. It didn't leave. It's still here in me, waiting, and when the time is right, it will return, stronger than ever, to claim what it believes is still ours. Hollow Creek is free for now, but I'm not. And neither, I fear, is anyone else who stays too long.